This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
Hello and welcome. As we enter our 60th year since independence, India is suddenly the buzz around the world. After China, India is the next big thing. We are firmly in second place. Why has this suddenly happened? What are we doing right now? And by deduction, what did we do wrong earlier? With the world expecting such great things from India, will we live up to these great expectations? Will India finally achieve its full potential? Will India finally make its tryst with destiny? To look back at the last 60 years and to look ahead at the next few decades, we have the men and the young women who make India proud. From Cambridge, the Nobel Prize winner, Professor Amartya Sen. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. From Bangalore, the man who changed the mood of India when he took on the world and won with Infosys, Mr. Narayana Murthy. Thank you, Murthy, for joining us. And if there's one thing that makes us all proud, it's the young generation of Indians. And to represent that voice of our future, we have with us here Ila Patnaik. Thank you, Ila, for joining us. Perhaps what makes us most proud of India is its vibrant and working democracy, alive and kicking, some say kicking too hard, for 60 years, unique amongst developing countries. But there's always that lurking question, especially among the middle classes. Is democracy good for the economy, or does it slow down economic growth? Now, the obvious answer to that is it's maybe a middle-class dream about this happening. What do the middle class say? That India needs dictatorship for 50 years and then democracy, only after the economy has developed. But the obvious response to that is a reference to the facts of the last 60 years. Remember, India for the first 40 years grew at around 2 to 3%, the Hindu rate of growth, the famous Professor Raj Krishna phrase. And it's now growing at an average of 6% for the last 15, 20 years, maybe even higher now. The point is, we've had democracy throughout the 60 years. So under democracy, we've had 3% growth, and under democracy, we're experiencing 6% growth or higher. So clearly, the common factor is democracy. So Professor Sen, can I ask you your first take? Has democracy overall been good or bad for the economy in India?
Well, Prannoy, I think two things. First of all, I'm happy to answer the question, but of course democracy should not be judged as an input into the economy, rather than the economy should be seen as an input into the working of the Indian democracy. But on that question, you know, I think there is a kind of real gap there, because the performance of an economy, as far as the growth rate is concerned, really depends on the soundness of economic policy. It depends on the friendliness of economic policy rather than the fierceness of the political system. And indeed, the numbers that you put on the screen bring that out. The Indian performance of democracy hasn't changed. What has changed is the nature of economic policy. I would say there is not so much that democracy is a single-handed creator of economic growth, but it doesn't block off the possibility of having policies that make economic growth high.
If I could bring in Narayana Murthy at this stage. Mr. Murthy, I don't know, there is this emphasis now on the softer power and the expertise that India has developed in the soft center, and obviously the core to that is software. Do you find the people you hire today are generally, would it be a simplistic thing to say that they have democracy in their DNA, that they are creative, and that they are world-class in the softer areas of economic growth?
Well, in some sense, yes. I think compared to the previous generation, our youngsters are much more confident. They are much more articulate. They stand for their rights. They argue their point of view without any fear. And at the same time, they bring wonderful value to the debate,
they argue too much sometimes
at hand. You know, I mean, it's pretty good in that sense, because at Infosys, we call ourselves an enlightened democracy because we get points of view from all the people, and at the end of the day, the consensus that we arrive at is something that is committed to by everybody, and progress is much faster.
But there is the view, Professor Sen, that decision-making under democracies is slow. India is like an elephant or a large ship that takes a long time to turn around. You need consensus. You can't make quick decisions. You can't make bold decisions. And that's the argument that it slows down growth, and people look to China and are jealous that they can break down whole slum colonies and build skyscrapers without worrying about votes.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. You know, it's very tempting thought for anyone who is at all self-confident to think, gosh, if I was running the country without the benefit, without having been restrained by anybody else, I could make a real success of the country. But I think that's not a very nice thought, because basically it's very easy to make good policies, very easy to make disastrous policies. The same thing that allowed China to have economic reform suddenly in '79 also was the same system which allowed it to go into the Great Leap Forward with 30 million deaths between '58 and '61. In terms of economic growth comparison, I mean, obviously we are doing better than in the past, but the Chinese growth is still higher. But in the same period, since '79 to today, the growth of life expectancy in India has been 3 times as fast as that in China. And this is because of the silly policy, to a great extent, of suddenly abolishing the social insurance for health, which China had up to '79. No, I think we can turn around very easily, but we can turn in the direction of disaster as well as some other direction. And I think what you need with democracy for is to have discussion as to which direction we want to go.
In a nutshell, Mr. Murthy, would Infosys have been possible in a non-democratic country?
I don't think so. I'll tell you why. Because the beauty of Infosys is that it's an open environment, it's a pluralistic environment, it's a meritocracy, because we listen to all points of view and we get the best point of view. And that's the beauty of the democracy.